welcome, and thank you so much for joining us tonight for our event with Joseph Fink and Meg Bashwiner for the first 10 years, Two Sides of the Same Love Story. They're in conversation tonight with Mara Wilson. My name is Evan Karp, and I'm the events manager for Booksmith. We're an independent bookstore and mainstay of San Francisco's Haight-Ashbury district since 1976. Joseph Fink created the Welcome to Night Vale and Alice Isn't Dead podcasts and is the author of the novel Alice Isn't Dead and co-author of the New York Times bestselling novels Welcome to Night Vale, It Devours, The Faceless Old Woman Who Secretly Lives in Your Home, and 4 Welcome to Night Vale episode script books, Mostly Void, Partially Stars, The Great Glowing Coils of the Universe, The Buying of Lot 37, and Who's a Good Boy? Meg Bashwiner is a writer, performer, tour manager, podcaster, and producer. She's the MC of the international touring live show of the Welcome to Night Vale podcast. She's an alumni member of the acclaimed New York theater company, the New York Neo-Futurists. They live in the Hudson Valley in Los Angeles. And Mara Wilson is a writer and actor, perhaps best known for her childhood roles in Matilda and Mrs. Doubtfire. Her writing has appeared in the New York Times, Elle, McSweeney's, Reductress, Cracked, and on the fiction podcast Passenger List. Her book, Where Am I Now, was published in 2016. We had the pleasure of hosting for that at the old shop. A voice actor since childhood, her voice can be heard on BoJack Horseman, Batman Beyond, and Big Hero 6, the series. She's the voice of the Faceless Old Woman on Welcome to Night Vale and narrated the audiobook for The Faceless Old Woman Who Secretly Lives in Your Home. Joseph and Meg, congratulations on the book. And Mara, thanks so much for being here and leading the conversation. I'm happy to turn it over to you all now. And thanks everyone for being here.
Thank you, Evan.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us. The Booksmith is very important to me, I think, and it's also, I know, very important to Joseph and Meg as well. One of the first Night Vale shows that we did, I believe, and I'm not even sure if I was performing at this one or if I was just seeing this, but it was in San Francisco.
I was trying
Joseph,
to remember, were you at that show?
You were.
I think I was.
And it's in the book. I wrote about it.
Yes, you did. Oh, yes, I remember that because, and I actually know because while I was reading this, I have to admit there were times where I was like, am I going to come up in this? Because I was there for that. And I do actually in that. I think you mentioned my sister. I think it was a guest star and her sister.
Yeah.
So yes, I do make an appearance in that scene.
Yes, Mara is right. The unnamed guest star.
I was an unnamed guest star, and I was that was I think when I know for me that was a moment when we really knew that Night Vale was about to take off because Cecil came outside and it was like Beatlemania, like people were like attacking him, and I don't think we had really anticipated that.
No. I think we had done an event earlier that summer. This is 2013. So we had done an event in June that you came to as well. It was at Webster Hall. And and so it was in New York City. And there was like 100 people who showed up. And we were like, this is crazy. We've never seen 100 people anywhere. And then we did these Booksmith shows. And they were like, we packed the bookstore several times over. And like, there were just people on the streets. It's a wild time.
I remember someone came up and showed me the like Night Vale tattoo they had given themselves at that show. And I was like 2 months earlier, no one knew who we were. And then there was this person being like, I stabbed this into myself.
Yeah, I remember hearing a group of teenage girls very loudly. Like I was trying to find, I think that was the first time I went to the Booksmith. And it was the first time I had been there. And I was looking around trying to find it. And I ended up following the sound of a group of teenage girls talking very loudly about the Pacific Rim fandom. I was like, that's probably, that sounds about right. You know, I thought about what the people I knew who were into Night Vale were into, and that's how I got there. That's how I found my way to the Booksmith that night.
There was the Pacific Rim was the Pied Piper for you to.
Yes, exactly.
Pacific Rim fandom.
I think that whenever I talk about, I talk about stories or I teach, I've taught people, about stories or storytelling and things like that. I always say that for me, a story, the thing that makes a story different than an anecdote is a change. And I think one thing that is really interesting about this book is just the amount of change in it and change in relationship and things like that. And I think that probably the most interesting thing is a lot of people when they write love stories, they focus on that first sort of like, you know, dopamine rush of, you know, first meeting somebody, first falling in love, you know, having romantic chemistry, possibly, you know, sexual chemistry, things like that. They always focus on that, you know, but what relationships are about, and I feel like, Joseph, I can see this a little bit in your writing as well. I feel like what relationships are about, and something that I've heard both of you say, is relationships are about, you know, the way that they change and the way that the people in it change. Do you think that that was something that you went into this hoping to focus on? Do you think that is there something in this? Did you think that, was that something that you set out to do? Did you specifically want to tell a relationship story that was different than ones you'd heard about? Or did you just kind of set out on an experiment with no real idea of where you were going?
Yeah, we definitely was setting the setting out on the experiment with some idea of where we were going. It was kind of inevitable that change would come up because our lives did drastically change over the course of these 10 years and most people's lives drastically change throughout their 20s because it is such a transitional time, at least in the, you know, culture as we have it today, where you kind of leave college and leave your family and then you go on and do, you know, whatever it is that you're going to do next. And so that is cataloged in these 10 years. It's that segment of our lives. So there is that sort of built-in change, is that we're growing up. So it's, yeah, literal transition from young adultness to adultness. So yeah, so it wasn't necessarily something we set out to do, to be like, we're going to write something that is this, you know, we start with Meg at 22 and we end with her at 32. And this is the big journey she goes on. It really was more just tell the story. And luckily there was a lot of really good built-in change. So it had story to it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the idea was just the rules of the game, right? Like the rules of 10 years, and we write them as we remember them without consulting each other. But I do think that, like, yeah, as Meg said, the parameters of 10 years, especially, yeah, if you don't change from 22 to 32, then either you were the most
God help
advanced
you.
22-year-old or you're a terrible 32-year-old.
Do you think that, so you both are very accomplished writers? Meg, as you know, I am one of the biggest neo-futurist fans, you know, there is, and I've loved your work in that. Joseph, I feel like most of your writing, I know, and most of your writing that the world knows, is fiction. Is there, forgive me for asking about process, but do you feel like there is a difference between the process of writing, mostly autobiographical plays, and writing fiction and writing just about your life in prose?
I mean, I definitely don't have as much experience writing nonfiction. Like I don't even really do it on my own time. I don't like journal or anything like that. But I do think that the basic skills of like story structure and knowing how language goes together and how to pace a thing, that the same stuff applies to both. One of the main reasons I don't write nonfiction much is because I get very wrapped up in my head about the possibility of getting details wrong. Because there's
Right.
just so many little details in the real world, and it's hard to keep track of all of them. And that's what kind of why I like writing absurdity, because you can't really get absurdity wrong. And what I found enjoyable about this is I could write it as I remembered it, and me getting stuff wrong was built into the premise. Like that, me getting stuff wrong was a success.
Yeah.
I loved that about it. I felt like there were a lot of times where Joseph would say something, and then the next chapter, Meg would be like, I think Joseph says this, but it's not quite right.
Yeah, well, because I come from that nonfiction background, and especially with the neo-futurist, we put so much stock into truthfulness. Like, it's, as an ensemble member with the neo-futurists, it's something that you constantly call each other on too. So if when performing with the neo-futurists, the basic rule is you are yourself. Anything you say on stage has to be true. So and from this, we make lots of different shows, but yeah, so this is something that is sort of hammered into your head when you're creating this sort of work, is you have to be 100% factual. So yeah, I do sort of had that frustration of, well, like that's not right, but it doesn't matter because the game is that this is how he remembers it and this is how I remember it. So it's kind of like I had to let go of the like my hard grasp on this is the fact and I have the receipts for this fact, and just play the game of this is his version of events, and that's what we're doing here. So yeah, and then yeah, kind of the transition from writing the autobiographical short plays to writing stuff that is essay length and in conjunction with a book, it's great. You get to, I'm used to the Neo-Futurists do a lot of short plays, like 2-minute plays. So I am used to having 500 words to tell a whole story, and getting 2,500 words a chapter, 3,000 words a chapter is really freeing. It's really scary, but also really freeing to get to see different, show kind of more sides of myself in the storytelling.
Yeah, and I do have to say, I mean, I think Joseph knows that I think he's a good writer. I've told him before. If you didn't, Joseph, I think you're a very good writer.
Thank you, Mara.
And I sent a message specifically to Meg. I texted her as soon as the book was done, or maybe even before it was done, to say, Meg, you are a really good prose writer, because it's very hard. Yeah, and it's very hard, and I mean, I know because I tried. I mean, I started out writing plays, and then I moved into writing prose, and it was really hard. So it was really that was nice to see, and you have such an honest voice, and I think that one thing I think that's interesting, and I want to know like what your opinion is on this. Personally, I think that a lot of times fiction is more revealing than nonfiction, because you kind of inadvertently expose certain aspects of yourself. But I do think that sometimes when you're writing nonfiction, sometimes when people are writing nonfiction, you get the image of themselves that they have of themselves is very different than what the image other people have of themselves. But one thing that I did feel with this book was that it very much does feel like you guys. It feels very, very true to you, and true to the people that you are. Your sense of humor, you represent yourselves very, very well.
Oh, good. Well, Mara, you're someone who has known us for most of these 10 years. So you have a pretty good handle on who we actually were at the time and who we actually are now. So that's good. It's good to have that come across, because yeah, it is sort of this performance when you're writing memoir you're telling the story of this and you become a character, whether you like it or not. It's your story and you're telling the truth, or when these are real things that happen to you, but you're still the character. In order for a reader to be able to access it, you have to tell them what you're like. And if they don't know you, then you're a character. So yeah, so it is sort of, you do have to create a character of self and a character of other people. Like when I'm talking about Joseph, I'm creating the character of him. So yeah, while it is nonfiction, there still is performance and characterization that can be, that can be revealing, not so revealing. Kind of, it is the sort of control of the writer, is that they're the one who is holding the camera, so they get to point it wherever they want and style it however they want. So yeah.
At what point did you read each other's sides, or did you just not?
We've never read them. No.
Well, I feel like probably by now you have. But at what point did you actually read each other's work?
We read them right before we sent to the editor. Just because we trust each other's judgment. We want to get notes on even just like an artistic level of, does this work as an essay? Is there stuff that isn't making sense here? And we talked really as generally as possible beforehand, just to make sure that we weren't doing the exact same thing for each year. We just wanted to make sure we weren't telling the exact same story or taking the exact same angle on something. So if we'd be like, for 2015, I'm going to talk kind of generally about this, and the other person would be like, great, because for 2015, I'm talking about this. But yeah, I didn't read, by the time I read Meg's, I had written mine and edited it, and it was basically ready to send.
Yep.
Did you have any particular, I got a sense of it, and actually, because Joseph, you actually say that, certain chapters or certain years were hard to write. Did you have any that were particularly fun, or particularly your favorite or cathartic, that you really liked writing?
I mean, my favorite chapter in terms of like how I thought it turned out was 2011, which, as I say in the first sentence, it was a really hard essay to write. I really didn't enjoy writing it. but I think it turned out really well. My favorite one to write in terms of the experience of writing it was 2014, because it's just me reminiscing about tour memories, and there's nothing more fun than just sitting around and being like, remember this, which is basically that entire essay.
Yeah, which I do sort of in 2015 too, because we each needed a chapter where you get to reminisce on tour memories.
Yeah, I have a video on my phone somewhere of Meg in a trucker hat driving to the that song. Yeah. I think driving through Indiana or something. Meg just dadding it up. That was a fun and a weird time. Yeah.
Oh, I miss the van. I miss it. Miss driving.
You say that, but I also know that it was a love-hate relationship.
Yes. Yes.
It was.
We all survived though, which was, the odds were not in our favor on that one. So
we did. We did all survive. It's true.
Yeah. I really
it was. Yeah. Sorry, what did you say?
I was going to say that I really liked writing 2014, which is the How to Propose Marriage chapter. That was probably my favorite one to write. And then the toughest one to write for me was probably 2010. 2010 was kind of dealing with loving myself in order to be loved by someone else, which is a lot to unpack in the second chapter of your book. So that was that. But anyway, back to tour stuff.
I remember the editor, not to dig into that, but I just remember the editor coming back and being like, I want more on this. And you being like, God damn it.
Yeah, I had a chapter in my book like that too, where it's like, you want more on this and this. Yeah. And you kind of, you go through something as you're writing something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you definitely do.
Yeah. You learn a lot about it. Yeah. You learn a lot about yourself. It's another thing with nonfiction. It's something we always joke about with the neo-futurist. Like this theater can't be therapy. Like no one wants to see your therapy session on stage. But a lot of times in order to get to a piece of something, you have to put the therapeutic work in to realize how you felt about a thing that happened to you. And then write it to death until you have no sort of feeling or association with it anymore. But
it's I mean, it really does in some ways. Like I've that's why I think I say that everybody who wants to write a book should write a book, because I do think that it kind of gets some things out of you. Like I know personally for me, I struggle a lot with the concept of Matilda, but writing a book about and a chapter about Matilda helped me to kind of embrace it and accept it and love it more. I guess it would be kind of different with you because a relationship is something that's sort of growing and changing anyway. But do you feel like there were things that, would you say that chapter, writing that chapter was cathartic for you eventually?
Definitely, yeah, because I think it forced me to line up my thoughts about it. Because when you're living in the moment, you're just kind of reacting. You're kind of like, well, I'm trying to make this relationship work, and I don't have the pieces that I need to make it work. How do I get those pieces? So that while you're in it, it's not. But then looking at it from a distance and being like, oh, this is why I had so much trouble with this part of this relationship. It's because I did not have this self-acceptance, or had all these fears, or this, that, and the other. So being able to look at that stuff now that it had been lined up through the lens of time and wisdom it was helpful in having that not be a sore spot in my life anymore, but having it be a moment of strength of being like, oh, this is something that I got through, and that I was able to put the pieces together to get through. So yeah, when you're in it, you're just like,
exactly. I want to ask one last question before we get to readings. So whose idea was it to have squirrels on the cover?
that was me. We were kind of going back and forth with our publisher about the covers, and they sent us one that was like very sweet. But it was very, I don't know how to describe it without like, I don't know. It was very like Christian couple book, like it was, it was very vanilla. And so I was like, this is very sweet. Can we go like something weirder, punker? And then I sent them the picture of these. So I was like, put some like squirrels, like some taxidermied squirrels, because Joseph and I both love taxidermy. So
there's a lot of taxidermy in your home.
Yes,
there is. And
Joseph is readying one for camera right now.
as soon as you're done. So
I sent them this picture, and then like a day later they sent back a cover, and we're like, okay, great, we'll take it. So I just sent them a picture. I just Googled like taxidermied squirrels, because we mentioned squirrels in the book, and we also mentioned being in a 2-person kayak in the book. So I thought that would, be interesting.
And squirrels, and there's a squirrel at a very pivotal moment in your early relationship.
Yep.
I don't know if you want to give it away, or if we should give it away, but there's a very beautiful moment involving a squirrel, which sounds a bit strange out of context, but a squirrel leads to something.
The first time Meg ever said "I love you" to me was when she got startled by a squirrel jumping out at her and had to hang up the phone, and she said, "I love you, bye."
I was trying to save the squirrel because it was trapped. And scared. And so I was trying to free the squirrel while I was on the phone with Joseph. And I'm not animal control. And so I panicked and said, I love you, bye. And that was the first time I said I love you, because it was this squirrel. Not this squirrel. These are other squirrels. Joseph got this for me for my birthday this year. Hang on. Okay.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
So it's not actually specifically, the host has spotlighted it for everyone. There it is. You'll notice Meg added a little baby squirrel in the boat.
Yes.
So it's not actually the one from the cover. The one from the cover had already sold, but it turns out that squirrels in canoes is a really common taxidermy subject. Do not know why. And so I found these guys at like a taxidermy place in Iowa that was happy to ship it to me. And that is, those are our squirrels.
It was very nice. On the morning of my birthday, he's like, "Do you want your present?" And I was like, "Okay." And he's like, "Sit down at the table and close your eyes." And I sat down at the table, I closed my eyes, and he put it in front of me, and I opened my eyes, and they were so big. Like, it was just like, it was so startling. I think the first thing I said was, "They're so big."
They are definitely a lot bigger than you'd think.
There are different kinds of squirrels. Some squirrels are bigger than others. A better Morrissey song. Some squirrels are bigger than others.
These are robust. These are like live on a college campus next to the pizza trash can squirrels.
Oh yeah. We had those squirrels. We had those squirrels at my boarding school, definitely. And I know those squirrels too well. Eating the peanut butter pretzels and the pizza. Yeah, that sounds about right. So do you have a section? You both have sections you would like to read?
Yeah, sure.
Do you want
since
to
you're
move
looking, do
ahead
you want me
with
to go
that?
first?
Yeah, Joseph, you go first, because I'm finding my spot.
Yeah, we've been kind of reading different bits, so that I haven't read this bit at an event yet, but I thought it might be interesting. It briefly starts by mentioning Barb EQ Sauce, who was the first feral cat that we knew in LA, whose full name was Barbara Emmeline Gwendolyn Sauce, or Barbecue Sauce for short. But this is after we moved away from the house that Barbecue Sauce would come to, and it's about the time I survived rabies. We would miss Barbecue Sauce, but as it happened, the new house came with a cat of its own, a feral cat who lived in the backyard and who the landlord called Kitty, but as is our tradition, we renamed to Miss Fancy Feast. Every morning and evening, we feed her, and she sits at the edge of the patio and shouts at us while we do it. Reluctantly, we have come to the conclusion that she is, quote, adorable and, quote, our little cat, which has been a difficult reality to face for both of us. When I feel it...
Sorry, speak of the devil, my cat just jumped up, meowed, and then knocked over my microphone. So,
When I realized I probably needed serious help with my mental situation was when I got rabies. Very few people survive rabies. In fact, there has been only one case that I could find online of someone developing rabies and surviving the experience. I suppose then that I would be the second. How it happened was I startled Fancy Feast while I was feeding her, and she lightly scratched me on my thumb. The scratch barely broke the skin. Later, my thumb hurt. Because of this, I concluded I had rabies. Now, I knew I didn't have rabies. I'm not completely divorced from reality. But at the same time, I was absolutely sure I had rabies. I had never been more certain of anything in my entire life. I was sitting with Meg, calmly watching TV, and in the back of my head, making end-of-life plans and deciding whether my family would have time to fly out to say goodbye to me. The division in my mind scared me. That I could know something was true, obviously I did not have rabies, and yet at the same time believe with utter conviction that its opposite was true, I'm about to die, I'm about to die, I'm about to die, was terrifying. I truly felt for the first time like I no longer had control over my mind. I've had issues with severe anxiety for years, but this was the first time I felt something like what a cruel outsider might call crazy. "You're sure I don't have rabies?" I asked Meg. "I am 100% sure," she said, and I had to let her certainty stand in for mine because I had no capability of creating certainty within myself. "I need help," I told Meg. "Yes, you do," she said. As it turns out, she did too. And if you want to find out why, it's in the book.
All right.
I love that bit, Joseph. I love that bit very much, and I have also convinced myself that I had rabies. So that was a particular time where I was just like, yep, I completely know where he's coming from. I once convinced myself I had scurvy. Strangely enough, I'd eaten a very, very heavily vitamin C meal that morning, but I still thought that I had scurvy. I knew I didn't have scurvy, but I thought I did. So yeah, I very much appreciated that part a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's interesting the things we can convince ourselves we have. But both of you are survivors of rabies, so there's nothing you can't handle. All right, so I'm going to read, I'll read a section from the 2013 chapter, which is kind of my love letter to San Francisco. In 2013 was when Night Vale started to find an audience and take off and become something that we could work on and have that be our job. So in 2013, Joseph quit his day job and started working on Night Vale and building the company up. And then a couple months later, I got the opportunity to go out to San Francisco to help start the San Francisco Neo-Futurists, which are totally still around and still a thing, and we'll be back in business when theater is open again, and have been online and have a main stage show on via the telephone right now. So they're still totally a thing, which is really cool and satisfying all these years later. But yes, this is 2013, and this is sort of at the end of the chapter where I talk about the chapter quitting my day job, selling insurance, and going out to San Francisco to help start this company. All right. At the end of my time in San Francisco, Joseph flew out to spend the last week with me. He sprung me from my bougie stowaway living situation, and we rented a nice Airbnb in the Mission. And I will say, my bougie stowaway living situation was great. Just going back to the beginning of this chapter. So there was they included housing in our contract with the San Francisco Neo-Futurists, and everyone else was housed in a commune in the Lower Haight, and I got to stay at a wealthy donor's house. And I was just in their guest room, and we had completely opposite hours. So, and I had my own bathroom, and they had a housekeeper come by every couple days, and so I didn't have to really do anything, and it was great. The people who were living in the commune were dealing with scabies outbreaks and 3 a.m. people trying to read their tarot cards and play guitar. And I was comfortably asleep in a very nice guest room. Anyway, all right. So Joseph sprung me from my bougie stowaway living situation, and we rented a nice Airbnb in the Mission. I made us breakfast every morning from provisions acquired at the Buy Right grocery store, drank coffee, and memorized lines. 1 month prior, I had been eating spoonfuls of store-bought peanut butter for breakfast while being bombarded with paperwork for flood insurance claims. We did 2 sold-out Welcome to Night Vale shows at the Booksmith's bookstore on Haight Street. These were our first shows after our popularity skyrocketed. They sold out instantly. The lines to get into the show clogged up Haight Street so badly that onlookers started a rumor that we were giving out free weed. Before the show, I walked through the line to help retrieve our guest star's sister, Mara's the guest star, who had become trapped in a horde of podcast/free weed seekers. No one even looked at me. They just let the pushy lady with the New York attitude through the line. At the start of the show, I introduced Cecil and then read the credits at the end. I was on stage of a total of maybe 4 minutes. After the shows, I signed autographs and took pictures with fans for hours. They called me Proverb Lady because I read the proverb at the end of the credits on the podcast. This is not a nickname I chose for myself, but it stuck. It reminds me of Lunch Lady, and I think there's a lot of power in that. They told me how much they loved the show and how much it meant to them. Some of them drove in from hundreds of miles away. This was a new experience and a natural feeling one. I felt comfortable in it. I wanted to do it forever. In the course of a few months, I had found myself in a completely changed life, and it was a good one. I did not spend my days explaining the complicated nuances of flood insurance to frustrated Italian-American senior citizens who were high on Sambuca and blood thinners at 10 o'clock in the morning. I did not wear a single piece of business casual clothing. I did not eat a single can of salty soup at my desk. My main gig was to bring people together and make them laugh. Change was proving to be a good thing, something I wanted to wrap my arms around, and for the first time in my life, not run from. And that's that.
That was a very fun time. I was there for that. And I remember my sister and I seeing the first San Francisco Neo-Futurists shows, and they were really good ones. There were some great, I feel like there were some plays from New York, but there were also some new ones there. And I do remember actually, Meg, talking about your relationship with Joseph in one of the plays. And I remember being like, oh my gosh, is he really embarrassed about that? Is there any, how does he feel about that?
And she said about me on stage over the course of 6 years.
I got permission for all of it.
You did. I didn't mind. This is not the first time that the dirty laundry of our relationship has been put out for public view.
I'm trying to think of anything that's particularly egregious.
I can remember exactly what you said. I think it was that it was like there was somebody was like, when was the last time you had sex? Somebody said, when was the last time you had sex? And you were like, yeah, I had sex with my boyfriend a couple days ago. And you said it was unremarkable.
Perfunctory, unremarkable. Hey,
and
they can't all be winners.
But that's true. And that was one thing that I was like, I appreciate that she was honest about that, because sometimes you're very tired.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's fun, but it's not, gonna be fantastic.
When you're with someone for that long, it's like, there's lots of reasons to have sex, and not all of them are to have the best time of your life.
Yeah, exactly. You made it very clear that you were like, it was fun, but it wasn't remarkable.
Yeah.
And I remember being like, that's very refreshing, but I hope that Joseph isn't embarrassed.
No, not really.
I think you were in the crowd. But yeah, that was a really fun time. That was a really fun time in my life anyway. I felt very much sort of on the outside. Not on the outside. I felt like I was being included, but it was a really fun time to sort of watch as things kind of grew and changed, and you took on these whole different things. So I'm glad that you chose that. That was a good part to read. So let's move on, and now let's start answering some questions. Do we have some questions? Let's see. We have some questions from the audience. And Rebecca, I believe Aris, apologies if I got your last name wrong, wants to know, were either of you surprised at the other's perspective in the retelling of a specific event?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the early years, when you're in your early 20s and you're in a new relationship, you're really focused on your journey, right? You're going through a lot, you're figuring out a lot of things, and that's sort of kind of taking up a lot of your brain space. And so it was really interesting, going back to those years and reliving them through Meg's point of view and seeing the journey she was going through, because it's just not one that I could have been fully aware of, I think, at that time. There's very few times where there was stuff that I flat out didn't know about or absolutely disagreed with. It was more just, it was just interesting reapproaching these very familiar memories from an entirely different point of view.
Yeah, what was surprising for me, again, it wasn't anything specific. It was more seeing Joseph tackle nonfiction from a fiction writer's standpoint. So the way that he describes moments and the way he sets scenes were really surprising to me, because he illustrated them in such a way that it was like seeing the other side of my eyes, you know, because I saw them this way, but then the way he describes them, and it's in such a way that he creates scenes where it was like I got to see the whole thing from his perspective. So it wasn't so much one thing, but all of the things kind of through the lens of a fiction writer writing nonfiction.
This question is from Rodrigo Deodoro. Question for Meg. I'm also married to a writer, and as such, I'm constantly being asked to read and review and edit new material. How does that usually work for you two? And how different was it for you not being able to read Joseph's chapters this time around?
Yeah, I mean, we usually don't show each other stuff until it is almost done. So it sort of kind of was the same situation with this book. I will say that Joseph reads my stuff way more than I read his, because Joseph works with a co-writer a lot. He works with Jeffrey on most of his projects. So he has Jeffrey is more Joseph's writing married partner than I am, because they do collaborate so much on everything. So what I see from him usually is final stuff that the two of them have written together before it goes out to X, Y, and Z. So actually, I feel like I got in a little sooner on this one because it didn't have Jeffrey Craner's hand on it first. So, but Joseph reads my stuff a lot more because, again, when I was working with the Neo Futurists, but because, which is an ensemble where we all read each other's work and critique on that. But I always had Joseph read my stuff before it went out.
Yeah, I was gonna say, were the Neos your work husbands and wives in that way?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing that Jeffrey is not actually in this book much because I was not focusing on work a lot. But it is true that there's kind of this second relationship that grew at almost the exact same time frame. That is, in its own way, a kind of marriage. That, you know, Jeffrey is somebody who I talk to almost daily, who I'm constantly working on stuff with. And so it is interesting that there's sort of this parallel relationship story that's not in this book.
Yeah, you and Jeffrey could do the first 10 years.
The first 10 years with each other as well.
Where did you, Joseph, just found all these puzzle pieces. Where did you find them?
We're at our dining room table, and in the early part of the pandemic, Meg got very into puzzles, as a lot of people did. And I just in like the crack of the dining room chair found a bunch of pieces of the puzzle she was working on.
It's incredibly frustrating.
Are they from different puzzles or just one puzzle?
No, they're all from the cactus.
That's from Desert Cacti of the Southwest. I know it.
There might be other ones.
Lauren C. wants to know, do you plan on writing the next 10 years later? With a little tongue out emoji.
I guess we'd love to. Like, a lot of it depends on if people seem to like this book. If, you know, the ability to sell a second book is always based on how many people like the first book. But we're spoilers, we're about to have a kid. So I imagine that the next 10 years, in many ways, it's like the first 10 years. It's a different kind of first 10 years.
Which is how we will pitch it to publishers when we try to sell it.
but I imagine it's going to be an equally chaotic and transformative 10 years, just because you have a new person growing with you over those 10 years.
Yeah, we have actually started working on it because we wanted to write this one in real time, as opposed to the first 10 years, which we wrote all of the chapters in 2019 ish. No, we were pretty much turned in by 2019, end of 2019, beginning of 2020. So we wanted to, for the next book, we wanted to write it in real time. So write 2020 during 2020, write 21 during 21, and so on and so forth, and see how that looks at that experiment. So yeah, we get to start.
That would be an interesting. Yeah, and that would be an interesting thing just for your child to read. You know, when they're old enough to read it, and
I had that thought about that. I'm like, I don't know if I want my child to read this. I don't know if she'll want to read it.
Yeah, I wonder about that. Megan O'Malley says, hello from Ireland. It's 2:45 a.m. here, and I am loving this. Thank you, Megan. Thank you for staying up so late.
Thank
I
you.
wanted to ask, how did you celebrate when you finished the book?
Well, it was 2020. We were in our home, fearing for our lives.
Well, we finished, like, we turned in the final draft in like early 2020. So yeah, I don't know if there was like ever a time of celebration, because we like turned it in and then we're like, we're going to go on this big tour. And the big tour started March 10th, 2020. And then we had some other stuff to immediately deal with, it turned out. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if there was ever a point. It is a thing of like when you're constantly making stuff, which you kind of have to be to make any kind of living in this business. It is hard sometimes to stop and celebrate, or stop and even just take stock of like, oh, it's cool that I did this, because you're already like, well, that one's done. Now let's look at the next 3 deadlines and see what we're doing. And it could be really easy to just get caught in that cycle and never take a second to just appreciate that you finished something.
We did kind of celebrate the book coming out though. I did last week. I like got a prenatal massage, and like, and then our friend Symphony, we were all fully vaxxed, so she came and visited. So we got to have like, have her come stay for a day and make dinner, and she stayed over, and it was nice. We like saw a friend. And after not seeing a friend, we had a friend come hang out with us, which was cool. Yeah. Every day is a celebration when you're married to Joseph Fink,
Yeah, I mean, I've been to temple with Joseph Fink. Can you imagine how wild that is?
It was back when we were synagogue shopping.
Yes. We went to 2 different synagogues together. Yeah. And I had to be like, oh no, I'm not his wife. His wife's not here. She's really cool. You should be his wife.
You could be synagogue wife. It's okay.
Synagogue wife, exactly.
His grandma would be so pleased.
So Rory Lemke has a question more about writing, which is it rude to ask people if they like your stuff before it's finished? I get tons of anxiety from it. So
I think I want like clarification on the question, unless you understand.
Like sending someone a draft that's not done to be like, what do you think of this?
Yeah, I think so.
I think when I, as a person giving feedback and when as a person requesting feedback, it's always good to set the person you're asking up for success. So be like, give them some sort of specific question, be like, hey, this isn't done yet. I'm working on this. What do you think about this specific thing that I need help with or that I would like your opinion on, as opposed to like, here's the thing. What do you think? Like kind of giving them allowing you to kind of drive what sort of feedback you get from them in what specific way. So that is helpful to them, especially with something that you feel is unfinished, is what is the particular thing you want them to look at. And then, yeah, when I'm giving feedback on someone to someone, I ask them a bunch of questions before I start giving them feedback. So like, if I have a question about what is it that we're trying to accomplish with this section? What is it that you want me to understand about this? Or I'm having difficulty understanding what you mean here. So yeah, sort of if you're giving someone that's super raw, directing the traffic of their feedback is helpful to them and to you, I think.
Yeah, I'd say setting expectations is really helpful, because the way it's phrased of like asking people if they like your stuff, I mean, it's a valid thing if what you need is just some cheerleading. If you need someone to tell you, there's something good here, keep going. You just have to make that clear to them that that's their role. So that, if you're like, if you're asking for that, you have to say that. And if you want, as you say, specific critique, you kind of have to make that clear of like, is this clear? Does this make sense? Is the ending have specific questions?
Yeah. Rory says mostly joke writing, like writing jokes. Yeah. So when you're writing jokes, you can always ask them if they found them funny. And if so, is there a way that they could be more funny?
I also have a rule that I had to put in place with Meg, and it's just a good rule in general, which is if you ask someone for a critique and they give it to you, you are under no obligation to take the critique. You can ignore it all you want. What you cannot do is argue with it. If someone takes the
Right.
time to read your thing and give you a critique, you cannot tell them they're wrong. You are free to ignore them. You just can't argue with them.
Because what that means, if they don't understand it, that means that it's not coming across right. That's my experience anyway. Is if somebody says, well, it's like this, and then in your head you're like, well, no, it's actually like that, then you think, okay, well, I have to make sure I have to do a rewrite so that it doesn't come off like this, it comes off like that.
Yes.
That's what I take from it.
Yeah.
I know when I write, I tend to write sort of out of, I'll write like a sentence that seems good to me, and then, you know, a paragraph that seems good, and I'll be like, okay, those come later, and then I'll start writing the beginning, and then I'll jump ahead and write a paragraph or something that comes even later. And so I'll show it to people and I'll be like, just read through this, and then there's going to be a big gap in the middle here, and then there's going to be this thing that's supposed to happen later, and just tell me if you can make sense of that. And eventually, I think you also probably need to find people that can give you feedback that understand your way of writing and your own process. That I think is really is really helpful, because now I have friends who can look at my hieroglyphic like drafts and sort of translate it into something that kind of makes sense. Rodrigo Deodoro also asks to Joseph, between the book and our play gear, it feels like you've been on a nonfiction streak. Do you attribute this change to anything in particular?
Yeah, so for those who don't know, Our Play Gear is a show I do that I started in March of 2020, just documenting this year through my eyes and a lot of people's. Yeah, I don't know. I kind of just, I try to follow ideas that seem interesting to me, and it did feel like a time that was worth documenting. And so Our Play Gear is in a lot of ways is me trying to feel out the most interesting way to document that in a way that was useful and that included as many points of view as possible. I haven't had time, like I had a new episode of Our Play Gear has not come out in 2 months. And I have so much on my plate right now that in many ways Our Play Gear has just become the thing that I feel guilty about all the time, because I haven't done a new episode. So yeah, I'm really proud of the work I've done on it, but yeah, at the moment Our Play Gear is the thing I'm just constantly remembering and being like, God damn it.
Yeah, Joseph, you are one of the most accomplished people I know, and I feel like you're still you are very much the type to be like, oh man, I can't believe that I didn't finish this one thing that that everybody loves and everybody is totally fine with. I feel like you do beat yourself up a lot. Our Play Gear is wonderful and stands on its own. So please try to remember that.
Yeah, you've released 9 books in 6 years. I think you're okay.
Yeah. You're doing just fine. Yeah, the idea of Joseph like having an ego is a really that's a very funny idea to me. Joseph and I both we share an anxious streak, I would say.
We're
all right. Do we have
extremely similar people? Yes,
we are. I love that, and I love that about Joseph. I would love to be cool like Meg, but as
we
such,
can't all be.
We can't all be. We can't all be. Although Meg and I think sometimes we have similar taste in fashion. We both wear dresses and cowboy boots a lot, or at least we both used to.
Yes, but when we used to wear clothes to leave our house.
Exactly.
Yeah, I also think that there's a nice combination between people who are, I don't know. Thank you for thinking of me as cool.
Yes.
I find both you and Joseph's, the way you think about things, to be very cool. So
yeah. There's something. Yeah, it looks like that's it for the questions. Yeah, I think that there's very much and that I think is an interesting. It's an interesting combination. It's one that comes across in very well in this book. I think Meg, you tend to be, or at least come across as a very in charge person, and Joseph, I feel like you come across as much more of a sort of observant, wondering person. You're both very creative in very different ways, and so this book is kind of a nice mix of the two of you. I think.
Thank you. Thank you so much for reading it and for being here and for being our friend for most of these 10 years.
Yes, yes. And thank you for me being the for letting me tag along on all of your cool adventures, and for driving me places, and for not caring when this cat knocked over the microphone. So
that cat wants to be a star.
he does. Basil wants to be a star. He really does. So well, yeah, so I think that's about it. And thank you so much, Booksmith, for having us. We love you so much, Booksmith. You mean so much to us. The Booksmith has changed all of our lives in so many ways, and will continue to. So thank you so much, and congratulations, Joseph and Meg, on the book. Also on the
Thank you,
baby, but congratulations on the book.
Thanks,
But mostly on
Thank you, y'all. This has been really sweet. Mara, thanks for leading the conversation, and yeah, Meg and Joseph, congratulations on the first 10 years, the book and the first 10 years and the baby. It's really nice to see you guys, and yeah, congratulations on everything. Thanks for joining, everyone. Take care of yourselves. Go get the book right now, and take care. Yeah, have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.